So we'll start off on the left side with kind of our definitions and explanations of things. So let's start off with endogenous theory. So right here I kind of have my own description. And basically, endogenous theory is when the ancestral eukaryotes begin to have folds of the membrane, and the membrane started folding. There's repetition of those enfoldings to where it started creating structures in the cell of things like that held like the nucleus and the ER and Golgi. And this is whenever the mitochondria and the chloroplasts, they started kind of taking over the scene by like taking the role of ATP and lipid synthesis and receiving the genes from the host nucleus. Next we have endosymbiotic theory, which is above it, and then kind of my definitions and descriptions there. And it says just that the endosymbiotic theory is how the mitochondria and the chloroplasts, they came from bacteria that was entering a eukaryotic cell to make a symbiotic relationship. So it's basically like the organisms living together, and this occurred because mitochondria actually came from purple aerobic bacteria, which then evolved into mitochondria, and then the chloroplasts came from evolving from photosynthetic bacteria, and those just kind of got engulfed with the mitochondria coming first and the chloroplasts coming second. They got engulfed, and that was how they became this organisms living together, this like symbiotic relationship. And by the way, to give credit to Lynn Margulis for coming up with this theory. And then secondly, we have the question that was posed of how the origin of mitochondria predated the chloroplasts, and how the endosymbiotic theory kind of goes into play with that. And that's just kind of discussed here. And that just basically says, well, we have the mitochondria, which evolved from the aerobic bacteria, the purple aerobic bacteria, and that was consumed first by the ancestral eukaryote. So it first engulfed that, and so we then had that eukaryote now with the mitochondria. And then later the eukaryote engulfed the chloroplast that came from the photosynthesis bacteria, and so the chloroplast came second, but then they now are together in a symbiotic relationship. Then below we did some diagrams explaining things because it's easier to see images and understand stuff. So we're going to start off with the endogenous theory, and that starts off here as just really simple. It's that simple ancestral eukaryote, and really all it had was the DNA in the middle and the plasma membrane. So my plasma membrane's in pink and the DNA is the red in the middle. And as you see here, we start getting those foldings, right? We get those foldings where now it's going to start being able to open up like it is here, where now it's opening up, it's creating this vesicle, where now we have a vesicle with a DNA in it, and the plasma membrane is also extending all the way around that. And so that then leads us up here, follow the arrow, and it takes us up here where, so not only are we having a vesicle with a DNA in it from all these foldings, but now we're having things like the chloroplasts with a double membrane and the mitochondria with a double membrane that are starting to become part of that ancestral eukaryotes. And now it has all these parts like we discussed, where it has all the nucleus, the ER, the Golgi, all this kind of stuff, all the different parts. And then what's interesting is the endogenous theory kind of leads us into the endosymbiotic theory. So as we follow the arrow down, we're transferring now to like the concept of now we have like the simple, just a really simple eukaryote with just a nucleus, also has the plasma membrane that's included. And then we go next, all of a sudden it opens up. It does this little like, oh, we're about to engulf you. And so it starts to engulf this aerobic bacteria, which we know later turns into the mitochondria in blue down here. And then, as you see, it's now completely engulfed. And with that, and when it engulfs, if you notice, there's also that plasma membrane around it, so it has two layers now. It has what the bacteria already has on its own, and then this, when it gets engulfed, it gets another layer. So there's another bilayer. And then the photosynthetic bacteria does the same exact thing with where it just creeps up and then it engulfs it, and then now it's engulfed and it has also the layer around it to where it's double layered, and obviously with the nucleus staying throughout the entire process. And so that just shows how we go from this like the ancestors all the way into our modern eukaryote, and how it looks today, and how we know what all includes, etc., etc. And then we now have the evidence, for how mitochondria and the chloroplasts are kind of explained with the endosymbiotic theory, endogenous theory, stuff like that. So we are able to say that the endosymbiotic theory is a theory, not just